Prapadye Shriman Venkatanathārya Kavitārkika-Kesari Vedantacārya-varyo me sannidhattam sadahridi Prapadye Niravadyanam Nishadhyam Gunasampadam Sharanam Bhavhitanam Shatako Sri Ranganatha Shatako Payatindratrishtam Lakshmi Rasamma Shatajit Karunaikapatram Sri Rangavira Raghurat Shatako Pakrityam Vedanta Deshikayatindra Maham Prapadye Srimad Ranga Shatari Samyamivaral Labdhagamanta Dvayam Srimad Veera Raghudvahadya Shatajit Pada Ravinda Ashrayam Srimad Vedavatam Sadeshikayate Karunya Vikshaspadam Seve Rangatrina Shasanavasam Narayanam Yoginam Vedanta Deshikayati Shakatakshala Satyam Prasad Anavadyapanam Bhagayam Narayana Viturya Kripa Bhishtam Sri Rankanathi Shekaram Ashrayamaha Srimate Srivan Shatagopa Sri Vedanta Deshikayati Indra Mahadeshikaya Namaha Srimate Sri Lakshmi Nrsimhadevya Paduka Sevaka Srivan Shatagopa Sri Narayana Indra Mahadeshikaya Namaha Srimate Srivan Shatagopa Sri Rankanathi Indra Mahadeshikaya Namaha. Welcome everyone. Let me just start. You can all still see my screen, right? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so some of you might remember that some weeks ago when we last met, when Adian was here to talk about some stories, we had looked at this book or this piece of work called Thirukkolur Penpillai Rahasyam. Okay, so how many of you remember that we talked about it some weeks ago? And how many of you?
I remember.
You remember, right? Okay.
Yeah, I remember.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
there was this wise lady from Thirukkolur who was leaving
Right, exactly.
Tirunagari, and
Yeah.
I think I forgot who it was, but
Ramanujar.
oh, Ramanujar.
Oh, no, she was leaving from
Arvad.
Tirunagari, and then Ramanujar came, and then he asked, "Why are you leaving?" And then
She gave, I think, 80 a different set of
yeah, she gave
examples
80
of
explanations
why
to why.
she's leaving.
Excellent. Very good. Very good. Okay. So you guys remember everything, right?
Yeah.
So, of course, last time we sort of introduced the book. We learned what the story behind the book was. But it's obviously not possible to go through everything that this lady said in one session, right? So we thought we'll do just one more session to go through some of the things, some of the important things that we did not talk about last time. Okay. So obviously, you guys all remember the background of the story, what happened and everything very well. Just in case, I don't want to assume that everybody on the call today was there last time as well. Maybe some people missed it. So just for their benefit, let's just very quickly go through a recap of what the story is. Okay. So as some of you said, just to remember, the characters in the story behind the book are Swami Sri Bhashyakara, Swami Ramanujar. That was one. And the other is this lady called Thirukkolur Penpillai. She's called Thirukkolur Penpillai because she was a very wise lady who lived in the town of Thirukkolur. Okay, and what is the significance of Thirukkolur? Thirukkolur is a town very close to Alvar Tirunagari, and the thing that Thirukkolur is famous. It is one of the Navatirupatис, and the thing that it is very famous for is that it is the birthplace of Madaragavi Alvar. Okay, so Madaragavi Alvar was born there, and then he served Nammalvar in Alvar Tirunagari for a long time. But Thirukkolur is important in our Sampradayam also because it is the birthplace of Swami Madaragavi Alvar. Okay, so this the story goes that as one of you said very well, this lady from Thirukkolur was actually leaving the town just when Swami Bhashyakara was walking into the town, and Nammalvar in the Tiruvazhmozhi says that anybody who understands Thirukkolur, anybody who comes and sees the Perumal of Thirukkolur, they will never leave the town. That's what Nammalvar says in the Tiruvazhmozhi. So Ramanujar asked this lady, you know what Nammalvar has said, that anybody who has seen this Perumal Vaitamanadi of Thirukkolur, they will find it really hard to leave this town. Why are you seem to be an exception to that story? Why why are you leaving the town? And so she answered saying, oh great Swami Ramanuja, I don't think I'm worthy enough. She said, the Nammalvar said that anybody who has been in Thirukkolur never leaves the town, but he was talking about great people. She said that I don't have all that amount of greatness. Since I'm not great, I feel like I don't deserve to live in this town. And so she said 81 things, okay, all of which say, she tells us about 81 different stories of people and says, and talks about the greatness of all these people and says, I don't have any of the greatness that these stories tell us about. Okay, so the point of this Thirukkolur Penpillai Rahasyam is not just about this conversation between this lady and Swami Ramanujan, but each of these 81 stories tells us something about how we should be. Okay, so what this lady is trying to tell us is, this is how one should live, this is how one should be, and therefore there is something to learn for each of us. Okay, so what we did last time was, so of course this book covers a wide range of stories. Okay, so that it talks about stories from Srimad Ramayanam, it talks about stories from Bhagavatam, it talks about stories from Mahabharatam. There are all these sort of stories from the Puranas and Itihasas are also there, but the book also talks a lot about people who are important in our sampradaya. Okay, so it talks about a lot of people in the Guru Parampara, and it tells us some very interesting anecdotes about people in our Guru Parampara and gives us examples of how those people were also great. Okay, so last time what we did was we focused a lot on stories from the Itihasas and Puranas. This time we will focus a little bit on people from who are a little bit closer in time, right? The Itihasas and Puranas happened very long ago. The stories of the Guru Parampara happened relatively more recently. Ramanuja himself lived just over 1,000 years ago. So we are going to talk about stories of that period of time, okay, around that period of time. So it's not just the Itihasas and Puranas that we have to look up to in order to learn how we should be. The point of today's stories is that there are a lot of important stories from the Guru Parampara also that are very interesting ones, but they give us equally important messages. Anyway, all of these put together, as we say on the slide, there are 81 stories in this book, but they all have one message, okay? That we have to give importance to Perumal, we have to have devotion or bhakti to Perumal. Similarly, we have to have bhakti to our acharyas and all the Bhagavatas, and that is what will make us good Sri Vaishnavas, okay? So in a way, this whole book has one message, and that message is, how can we become better Sri Vaishnavas, okay? So every Saturday we all get together, we listen to stories from the Puranas, we listen to things about how utsavams happen in temples, we learn about Perumal, we learn about our acharyas. All of these things have one underlying thread, okay? When we learn these things, or when we hear these stories, we have to try to assimilate some messages from these stories and try to become better Sri Vaishnavas. Okay, so that is what this is going to tell us about. So let us see what stories we are going to discuss today. Okay, the first one. So this Thirukkolur Penpillai says, "Nedunturam nadandeno nadamuniye pole." Okay, so the story is about Sriman Nadamunigal. Okay, Nadamunigal is a very important figure in the Guru Parampara. He is, in fact, he forms the link between the Alvars, Perumal, and the rest of the Acharya Parampara, because Nadamunigal, so who was Nadamunigal's Acharyan? In the Guru Parampara, Nammalvar, exactly. So, exactly. So there is Perumal Tayar up until Nammalvar. We don't have this present lineage of the Guru Parampara. So Nadamunigal forms the link between the rest of the Acharyas and Nammalvar. So he plays a very, very important role. Okay, but the story that Thirukkolur Penpillai talks about in the life of Nadamunigal was not the famous stuff that we read about when we learn even in our Ahobila classes. We learn about Nadamunigal's life story, right? We learn about the highlights of Nadamunigal's life story. The example that she gives, or the anecdote that she quotes from Nada Munigal's history, is a little bit different from that history where Nada Munigal went and learned the Nalayiram from Nammalvar and then propagated it. That is all also important, but this tells us a different aspect of Nada Munigal's personality, as different aspect of his life. Okay, before we go into the story, one thing we should know is that Nada Munigal was an expert in yoga. Okay, what is yogam? It's not the yoga that we learn in PE class. This yogam that we talk about is the process of thinking about Perumal all the time. Okay, without any gap, it is related to Bhakti Yogam, but it is basically the process of not thinking about anything other than Perumal. Okay, and why do people do that? People do it for multiple reasons, but the reason that Nada Munigal did that was that he found that to be the highest form of enjoyment for him. Okay, when we think of, okay, when I ask you the question, what do you enjoy? Some of us may say, oh, I enjoy having ice cream. Some of us may say, I enjoy playing football. Some of us may say, I enjoy reading some books. For Nada Munigal, if you asked him, what do you enjoy? The only thing he would say that he enjoys would be thinking about Perumal non-stop. Okay, so he used to think about Perumal all the time, and so much so that whatever he saw around him, he used to think of it as Perumal himself. Okay, so this anecdote that Thirukkolur Penpillai tells us about the life of Nada Munigal is Nedunduram Nadandeno Nadamaniyai Pole. What does Nedunduram Nadandeno mean? Nedunduram Nadandeno means, did I walk for a very long distance like Nadamuni? So she tells us about a story where Nadamuni walked along. Swami Nada Munigal walked for a long distance. She says, he walked a long distance. I did not walk a long distance, so I don't have the qualification to be in this holy town of Thirukkolur. Okay, so what was the story? So Nada Munigal's bhakti was very well known, and we just talked about what he did. In the process of yogam, he used to enjoy Perumal, and that was a form of his own, or that was when his bhakti brimmed over, that would turn into yogam, and he would think about Perumal all the time. Okay, so he used to spend his days and nights just thinking about Perumal and doing nothing else. Okay, so the story that Thirukkolur Penpillai talks about is there are a couple of versions of the story that we hear about from the Guru Parampara. We have no way of exactly ascertaining which version of the story is the one that is being referenced here, but both of those are very similar stories. So one of the versions of the story relates to Nada Munigal and Krishna. So one day, they say, it's a very simple story. Nada Munigal was sitting down in yogam. He was thinking about Perumal. Okay, and whatever he saw around him, he just ignored it. He was just closing his eyes and thinking about Perumal. Even sometimes when he opened his eyes, his thoughts were still continuing to be on Perumal. By that time, Nada Munigal had become very famous in the local area. Okay, he was seen to be a very great individual. He was seen to be a great bhakta. So on that particular day, the local king, along with his wife, along with all of his entourage, his ministers, everybody, he had come to pay his respects to Nada Munigal. Okay, so Nada Munigal was sitting in yoga, and the king and his queen and his children, all of these people came, paid their respects to Nada Munigal, and but Nada Munigal did not respond. Why did he not respond? Because he was focusing on Perumal, right? As I was saying, he could not get distracted by anything else. So the king came. He was standing in front of Nada Munigal, hoping that he would open his eyes and bless him. And he waited a long time, and eventually Nada Munigal opened his eyes also. But when he opened his eyes, he did not bless him and say, "Oh, king, come sit down, let us talk about something. Can I offer you something?" He did not say any of that. He continued to be thinking about Perumal. He did not even respond to the king. But the king did not get angry, of course. He knew that Nada Munigal was a great man. So he continued to pay his respects. And after a point of time, the king said, "Okay, let me go away." And he went back. They all got into their whatever vehicles they came in. and they went back. Okay, and so this whole group of people went away. Nadamunigal then eventually came out of his yoga, came out of his trance, and he asked people around him, "What just happened here? Seems like something happened here. What happened?" So Nadamunigal had opened his eyes, right? He had seen what was in front of him also. He had not actually understood what was going on, what was going on. He had seen what had happened in front of him. So the people around him said, "Oh, you were captivated by your yoga. You were thinking about Perumal. But what happened was that the king had come, and the king."
My screen was frozen. So can you tell me what you were saying before saying?
Sorry. So how much did you miss? I don't know where.
I missed I think 2 facts.
Okay. So I was just saying that the king had come. Nadamunigal had closed his eyes, and then when he opened his eyes, he saw what was going on. I mean, he didn't register it, but he saw what was going on in front of him. But the king waited again, hoping that Nadamunigal would respond. He did not respond, so the king went away. And Nadamunigal then asked. Nadamunigal eventually came out of his trance and said, "What happened?" So people told him that the local king, he had come. His wife was there. All his entourage was there. They had come. When people told him that, Nadamunigal did not even register that the king had come. He was still in the process of coming out of his trance. He suddenly realized that somebody who was wearing a lot of ornaments, who was wearing a crown, had come. He had his wife next to him. He had a lot of people around him, and Nadamunigal, who was still in his bhakti, in his yoga, in his trance, thought for a moment that Perumal himself had come. He thought Perumal had come. He thought the king who was wearing his crown and everything was Perumal. He thought that the queen who was standing next to that king was Thayar. He thought that the people who were standing around him were the Nityasuris, the people from Sri Vaikuntham. All those people had come. And he was shocked. He said, "Oh, Perumal has come to see me." And he said, "Where did that person go?" And they said, "No, he has gone away. He was waiting for you. He has gone away." So Nadamunigal suddenly woke up, or stood up with a start and started running. Okay. And he started running saying, "Okay, tell me the direction in which Perumal," he kept saying Perumal has come. But actually it was the king, right? And he started running behind the whole sort of set of vehicles where this king was going. And he kept going and going and going. He went from where he lived. He lived in this place called Katumannar Kovil. He was walking, and in those days, walking from one town to the other was very hard, right? It wasn't like there were a lot of big, concrete roads and 6-lane highway and all those things. Nothing was there. It was very hard to walk from one place to the other. He went all the way from where he lived to this place called Gangekonda Cholapuram. We'll look in a moment how long that distance was. He kept running behind this person, thinking that just anything he sees around him is Perumal. Similarly, they say another version of the story is that Nadamunigal was in Yogam. And so one version of the story says that the king had come. The other version of the story says that somebody, like a local monkey charmer, he came. Like a person who comes with a monkey and shows you some tricks and goes away. Similarly, Nadamunigal, they say, was in Yogam. This guy came with his wife, that the guy who has a monkey, he came with his wife, he came with his brother, and he had a monkey and he was showing some tricks. Nadamunigal came out of his trance and suddenly thought that Sri Rama himself had come. He had come with Sita, he had come with Lakshmana, and that monkey was Hanuman. He suddenly said, "Oh, Perumal has come to see me. How can I lose this opportunity?" And started running behind him. And he went all the way from Katumannar Kovil all the way to Gangekonda Cholapuram. Now, this is, of course, so I'm just showing you how long that distance is. This is from Google Maps as of today, and it shows you all different places that exist today. Not all of those places existed back in time, but so he was an old individual, right? So he thought Perumal had come to see him and started running behind this Perumal. He ran a distance of from 10.5 miles. Even today, if you walk at the pace that Google Maps thinks that you can walk, it takes 3.5 hours. An old man of that time, he kept thinking, "I want to see Perumal, I want to see Perumal," and ran all the way to Gangekonda Cholapuram from Katumannar. Now, obviously, going from one place to the other, walking 10 miles is not that big a deal at the end of the day, right? But just think about the mentality that Nadamunigal had. Anything around him, he thought it was Perumal. Anything that he saw, he thought it was Perumal himself. Any little thing that we see, he thought that it is something for the service of Perumal. Okay, so this is what Thirukkolur Penpillai is saying. Nadamunigal could think about nothing other than Perumal. All through his life, the only thing he thought about was that Perumal will come one day to see me. Perumal will come one day to be with me, and that is all he did. So Thirukkolur Penpillai is saying, I don't have that kind of mentality. If somebody came in front of me, even if it was Perumal, maybe I will do one Anjali and say, okay, it's time for you to go. Nadamunigal saw some individual and ran behind Perumal. Okay, so we have to understand Nadamunigal's way of thinking. So that's the message that Thirukkolur Penpillai is giving us. Okay, so what is, of course, Perumal, we are not going to be great yogis like Nadamuni. Perumal is not going to come in front of us. So what is the moral of the story for us? Okay, so how do we assimilate Nadamunigal's way of thinking in the way we live our own lives? As always, we should look to what our acharyas have said, and Srimad Aishingar, even in his life, when you interacted with him, you could see examples of this. I'll give you a very simple example. So Srimad Aishingar used to go from one city to the other, one town to the other, Perumal with Malolam and the Velli Mandapam and all that, right? You guys know that Perumal and Aishingar travel from one town to the other. But just one very simple example. If Srimad Aishingar went to a big building, if that building had a huge hall, okay, the first thing that would come to his mind would not be that, oh, this is if we went and saw a huge building, right? We go to so many monuments, we see huge buildings and say, oh, this is the history of the building, this is how the building is, how well the building is constructed. That's the thing, those are the things that come to our mind. The first thing that Srimad Aishingar used to say when he saw those big buildings was, how nice it will be if I have Malolan here. How nice it would be if in this huge hall we could do Thiruvaradhanam for Malolan. How nice it would be if all the Bhaktas of Perumal could come here and partake of the greatness of Perumal, Malolan and our Acharyas, right? So that's a simple thing. When you see a big building, we think of other things. Great people like Srimad Aishingar used to say, okay, how nice it would be if Perumal could use this thing. Nadamunigal saw Perumal himself, but we see so many things on a day-to-day basis, right? Walking down the street, if we see a nice flower, the first thing we should think of is how nice it will be if we use this for Perumal's Thiruvaradhanam. If we see a nice fruit, a nice ripe fruit, before we think I should eat it, the first thing we should think of is how nice it will be if we can give this to Perumal. If we see a nice bowl of butter, the first thing we should think of is how nice it will be if Perumal, Navanitha Krishnan, takes this butter and enjoys it. Okay, so that is the way Srimad Aishingar used to think. So you don't need to look to somebody who lived more than 1,000 years ago, how Nadamunigal used to think. Just our own Aishingar used to think that way, and that is something we need to assimilate. That is the message that Thirukkolur Penpillai is giving us. Okay, so the way of thinking that Nadamunigal had, if we have that, then we will be worthy of living in Thirukkolur. That is one of the messages. Okay, so that is one of the stories. Let me just check the time. Okay, that is one of the stories. The next story is also about one of the acharyas who came after Nadamunigal, several years after Nadamunigal. So Thirukkolur Penpillai talks about this other acharya. She says, avan muraikka petreno Thirukkachiyarai pole. Thirukkachiya. So the person who we are talking about in this story is called Thirukkachi. She calls him Thirukkachiyar. We also know him as Thirukkachi Nambigal. Okay. How many of you have heard about Thirukkachi Nambigal?
I have.
Okay.
He did all of the Kainkaryam to Devadirajan.
Excellent. So he did all of the Kainkaryam to Devadirajan. So
he could talk.
Yes, go on. Yes.
He could talk to Perumal.
He could talk to Perumal.
He was one of Ramanuja's acharya.
He was one of Ramanuja's acharyas, and he could talk to Perumal. And he could talk to Perumal because he did very close Kainkaryam to Perumal. Okay, so when what he used to do, so for those who don't know all the details, I mean, I'm sure all of you know, but just to give you the details, Thirukkachi Nambigal was originally, he came from a merchant family, but then he was not interested in running sort of family business. he left their family business and said, okay, all I want to do is Kainkaryam to Perumal. Okay, Thirukkachi Nambigal, the only Kainkaryam that he did or he wanted to do, he was so eager to do, was to do Alavatta Kainkaryam. Alavatta Kainkaryam is to do fanning services. In those days, there was no electric fan, right? So some person had to take a fan and fan it. Okay, if it was a hot day, the rich people, they used to have people come in with a fan and fan them. Now, just think about how Thirukkachi Nambigal, his mentality was. He did this Alavatta Kainkaryam to Devadirajan, to Varadarajan, who was the Perumal of Kanchipuram. He did not think of that Perumal just as a Vigraham. He did not think of that Perumal just as an idol sitting in a temple, right? If it's an idol sitting in the temple, you're not even supposed to say these words and think of it that way. But if somebody did not understand it and they just thought of Perumal as an idol, and you were just thinking about the physics of what the idol is made of, you can say, how can the idol feel heat? If it's a very hot day, we feel hot, we start sweating, we feel thirsty. How can the idol feel all those things? But that is not the way we are supposed to think about Perumal, because the idol is a representation of Perumal himself. Perumal himself takes the form of that idol, and he is there with us to bless us and to be along with us. That is the way Thirukkachi Nambigal thought, and he used to do this fan Kainkaryam for Perumal, which is called Alavatta Kainkaryam. So because of Thirukkachi Nambi's closeness to Perumal, see, even if you take a day-to-day example, right? So let's say there is a very rich man. He has a big house. It's a very hot day. He's very tired. He's sitting in his big chair, and there is somebody who's fanning him, right? So when he's tired and sitting there and relaxing, they naturally talk to the people who are standing next to him and fanning him. Right? This person is fanning him. So obviously they strike up a conversation. Perumal and Thirukkachi Nambigal, their relationship was like that. Perumal used to sit there and relax, and Thirukkachi Nambigal used to talk to him. So they used to have a lot of conversations, and that is the bit that Thirukkolur Penpillai is talking about. Thirukkachi Nambigal's view of Perumal was as somebody who we need to serve, and Perumal used to have a conversation with him. Okay, so these conversations, obviously, okay, having conversation with Perumal is a great thing, but Thirukkachi Nambigal's conversations with Perumal form the seed of our Sampradaya. If Thirukkachi Nambigal did not speak to Perumal, or if Perumal did not speak to Thirukkachi Nambigal, it is possible that the Sri Vaishnava Sampradayam might have gone in a very different direction. Okay, can any of you tell me why that is the case? Why is this
Otherwise, Ramanujan wouldn't become our Acharya.
Okay, why is that? Okay, that's a good answer.
He wouldn't
why
know
is that?
the all
Because
what they were.
Ramanujan, the only way that he would become a sannyasi was that he
Because
Okay, one at a time.
Ramanujan had some doubts.
Exactly. Ramanujan had some doubts, and one of you also mentioned Aruvartegal, right? So this conversation between Thirukkachi Nambigal and Perumal is what became the Aruvartegal that Ramanujan was looking for. So we have a few stories to cover, so I'll go quickly through the stories since you all know this. Ramanujan, who was not a sannyasi then, he had questions. He did not know what to do. He had doubts about things that he was learning. He had given up his learning with Yadav Prakasha. He did not know where to go next. He was looking for an acharyan, and he wanted direction. He went to Thirukkachi Nambigal and said, "Can you be my acharyan?" Thirukkachi Nambigal said, "No, I cannot be your acharyan, but I can try to find you some direction." So Ramanuja said, "Please, when you talk to Perumal, please try to get me the direction that I need." He did not tell him exactly what his questions were. He did not tell him exactly what his doubts were, but he said, "Please ask Perumal for direction." And Perumal gave, through Thirukkachi Nambigal, Perumal sent a message. He sent not one but 6 messages, and those 6 messages form the core of our Sampradaya. Okay, one of the important messages there was to Ramanuja was to go and seek the feet of somebody as his acharya. Who did Perumal say that Ramanuja should go and seek as his acharya?
Periyanambi.
Periyanambi, exactly. So Perumal said, since you are looking for an Acharyan, go to Periyanambigal and he will be your Acharyan. Okay. And also one of the other important things that Perumal said was that Sharanagati is the means to moksha. He said, if you do Sharanagati, I will give you moksham. That is also an important core principle of our sampradayam, and that clarification came from Perumal himself. Okay. So Thirukkolur Penpillai is saying, look, these sort of I did not have these kind of conversations with Perumal. I did not do close, devoted kainkariam to Perumal. I did not do that, and Perumal has not spoken to me. So I don't have the qualification to live in this place. Okay, so I'm sure you guys all know the answer to this question. But yeah, just a quick quiz question in the meanwhile. Who was Thirukkalur Acharyan?
Alavandar.
Good. Okay. Alavandar. Okay, good answer. Okay, so Alavandar was Thirukkalur Acharya. Okay, Alavandar had several shishyas, one of whom was Thirukkalur. Okay, and it was in fact Thirukkalur who, from a distance, he introduced Ramanujar to Swami Alavandar. Ramanujar did not actually meet Alavandar, but Alavandar saw Ramanujar from a distance, and it was Thirukkalur who introduced him to Alavandar. That is a story in and of itself. Anyway, so that's this conversation that Thirukkolur Penpillai is talking about forms the core 6 principles of Sri Vaishnavism. We don't have time to go through this, but I'm sure you all have learned this in your Ahobila classes. Those who haven't learned it yet will I'm sure learn about it in your future classes. Okay, so the next story is about this person called Kuravanambi. Okay, so what Thirukkolur Penpillai says is Manpuvai itteno Kuravanambiyai pole. She's talking about Manpu. Man means clay, right? Clay or earth, and Pu is Pushpa. So he's talking about these flowers made of earth, or these flowers made of clay. Okay, so this is a quick story. We have a couple more stories to cover, so I'll go through the story very quickly. But this is also a very, very important message that Thirukkolur Penpillai is telling us about how we can be better Sri Vaishnavas. Okay, so the scene is where this story happened was in and around Tirupati. Okay, in those days, Tirupati was not a very easy place to get to. Okay, so because just climbing up the mountains was hard. The mountains along the way, there were very dense forests. Even Perumal's temple was surrounded by dense forests. So just even the process of going to see Trivengadamudiyan and coming back was very hard. So there were a lot of kings around that time who had contributed a lot to making the place accessible. One of those kings was Tondaman Chakravarti. So he had done a lot of service to that Perumal. And what happened was that this Tondaman Chakravarti had, as a mark of his contribution to Trivengadamudiyan, to the Lord of Tirupati, he had made a whole lot of golden flowers. He said, I have a lot of wealth. I want to use it for Perumal. He had good intentions. Okay, so he said, I want to make golden flowers for Archana for Perumal. But even though he had good intentions, even though he wanted to use his wealth for Perumal, he had a small shred of ego. He thought, oh, it's great, right? That Perumal has given me the wealth to make these flowers to contribute to Archana in golden flowers. He may have even thought, because of me, there are going to be Archana with golden flowers. So he had a little bit of that thinking in his mind. Okay, so he had made these golden flowers, and those golden flowers were kept at the feet of Trivengadamudiyan. And he went on the first day that these flowers were being presented. He went there, and he was expecting to see all these golden flowers at the feet of Perumal, and he was shocked. There was all the golden flowers that he had given, but on top of those golden flowers, there were these 2 flowers made of clay. So he said, I don't know where these flowers have come from. There are various versions of the story, but I think the version that I guess makes sense is he would have said, I don't know where these flowers have come from, take them away. And then the next day, same thing happened. There were all these golden flowers, but on top of those golden flowers, right at the top of all those golden flowers, was these two flowers made of clay. Thondaman, that king was puzzled. I said, I have not put any flowers made of clay. All the flowers that I presented are made of gold. How can it be that it's, where are these coming from? And that night in his dream, Perumal told him that at the foothills of Tirumala, there is this very poor potter. All he does all day is to make pots and pans of clay, right? But before he does that, every morning he takes a bit of clay, he makes that into, with his own hands, he makes that into a murti of Thiruvengadamudaiyan, and then with the first two pieces of clay, he makes two very small flowers made of clay and places it at the feet of that clay idol of Thiruvengadamudaiyan. And all he says is, all he asks to Perumal is, Perumal, I don't have any resources. I'm not a very rich man, but whatever I have, I want to offer to you. And he takes that little piece of clay, makes that flower, and keeps it at the feet of Perumal. Perumal tells this king in his dream that, look, you having all this wealth and making these golden flowers, I'm happy about it, but you cannot have the ego that you have presented these flowers to me. The way you should think is, whatever I have, everything belongs to Perumal. He is giving me the opportunity the means, the energy, the inclination, all of it, to make whatever I can to Perumal, and I hope he is happy. That's the way this guy, this potter, thinks. Okay, so his name was so he has none of the ego that you have. Okay, that's what Perumal told him, and for that reason, this person, this potter, he is known in our sampradayam as Kurumbarutha Nambi. Kurumbu means, and we'll talk about this word Kurumbu soon, in a moment in the context of another story. Kurumbu means something that is not good, something that is wrong with our way of thinking, some ego or conceit or some bad way of thinking, right? And he is somebody who has killed the bad way of thinking. Kurumbu Arutha Nambi. Kurumbu means this bad way of thinking, and this potter, even though he had no resources, he wanted to give whatever he had to Perumal. And he didn't even have the ability to go up the mountain, because as I said, it was very hard to go up the mountain, right? He made a Perumal out of his own clay. He took his clay and made a bunch of flowers. So it's not important that we make something great for Perumal. Whatever little we do, because all of us are students, you're all children, you may not have a lot of resources, but whatever little we have, what we should do is, the little we have, we offer to Perumal, and we offer it without any conceit. We offer it without any thinking that, oh, I am offering it to Perumal. Okay, that's why his name is called Kurumbarutha Nambi. Okay, so Thirukkolur Penpillai is saying, unlike Kurumbarutha Nambi, I did not make flowers out of clay. So I do not have, in other words, Thirukkolur Penpillai is not saying, okay, what should we all do? We should make flowers out of clay. That's not the moral of the story. The moral of the story is the thinking behind the clay flowers. I did not have that, and that's what we should develop. Okay, so that's the other thing she mentions. All right, so we have two more stories to finish today. Both of these are about Acharya Bhakti. Okay, and one of the main messages that Thirukkolur Penpillai gives, along with Bhakti for Perumal, is that the Bhakti for Perumal should turn into Bhakti for our Acharya. That is very, very important. Okay, so the examples she gives are of two Sishyas of Swami Ramanuja. The first Sishya of Swami Ramanuja she talks about is this person called Vatuganambi. Okay, so how many of you have heard of this person called Vatuganambi? Okay, good. If you've not heard about Vatuganambi, this is our opportunity to learn about it. Okay, so Vatuganambi was one of the Sishyas of Swami Ramanuja. Now Ramanuja, obviously at that time, he had a lot of Sishyas, right? In Swami Ramanuja's Matham, there used to be a lot of people learning from him, a lot of scholars coming to talk to him. There were a lot of people doing service. Everybody wanted to be Swami Ramanuja's Sishya. So each person was given a separate duty in the Matham. Okay, so this person, this Vatuganambi, his name is also known as Andhrapurna because he came from the region of Andhra. And Thirukkolur Penpillai is quoting an instance from Vaduganambi's story. She is saying, Ingu Paal Pungum Indreno Vaduganambiye Pole. Paal Pungum, Paal means milk, right? So she was saying, unlike Vaduganambi, did I say that the milk is going to boil? Vaduganambi said the milk will boil over, okay? So she's saying, I did not say that. So that's the story. What is the story of milk boiling over? So Vaduganambi's name was Andhrapurna, and the duty that Vaduganambi was given in the Mattam, he had only one duty. He had a very specific task. The specific task was to warm the milk for Swami Ramanuja's consumption. Okay, so in the evening, Swami Ramanuja would have a little bit of milk, and Vaduganambi's duty was to make sure that the milk was boiled and kept at the right temperature, ready for Ramanuja. Because there were so many Sishyas that Ramanuja had that it is not like Ramanuja had to appoint one person to do a lot of things. There were each person was given a little task, and people thought even that little task that in service of Ramanuja was a great blessing that he gave to them. So that's all he had to do. So the story is a very small one, but a very interesting one. So Vaduganambi used to every day boil the milk, warm it up, and keep it at the right temperature for Ramanuja. One day, what happened was he was boiling the milk, and so they lived in Srirangam, right? So the Utsava Murti of Sri Ranganatha was coming around in the streets of Srirangam. What is the name of the Utsava Murti of Sri Ranganatha? What is the name of that Perumal? Huh? Sorry, can you? Number right? Exactly.
Number one.
Perfect. And what is the name of the Moolavar? But in our Sampradayam, what do we refer to him as? Periya Perumal. Exactly. So the temple of Srirangam, everything is big. So the temple itself is referred to as Periya Kovil. The Perumal there is referred to as Periya Perumal. And the Utsava Murti is referred to as Namperumal because he roams around in the streets and comes to us, right? So he's our own Perumal. So Namperumal was coming in the streets. And everybody in the Mattam, they all ran out. They just stopped doing whatever they were doing and ran out to have a darshan of that Perumal. Because Perumal is so beautiful. When he comes out in the streets, it is so beautiful to see him walk. You heard about the greatness of Srirangam, the Utsavams in Srirangam, just the different ways in which Ranganatha Namperumal walks, even that is a beauty to behold. So everybody ran out of the Mattam to see Perumal and to pay their respects along with Ramanuja and to have the darshan of that Perumal. Vaduganambi did not move. He was at that point he was boiling the milk for his Acharyan, for Ramanuja, but he said he did not budge from his position. He didn't even. There was so much of noise around him. Everybody was excited that Perumal had come, but he was not excited. He was unruffled. He was just sitting there. So somebody, while they were running out to the door, they said, Vaduganambi, what are you doing? Namperumal is coming. You have to come. We have to come and see Perumal. He said, I'm not interested in seeing Namperumal. And they were like, what? Why are you not interested in seeing Namperumal? He said, I have to boil the milk. They said, what's so important about boiling the milk? He said, milk is easy to boil. You can just switch it off and come in. He said, if I don't keep an eye on the milk, and if I run away at the wrong time, the milk will boil over. Those days, it's not like they had gas stoves, right? It was either in a coal. They had to either burn coal or firewood, and it's not easy to turn up and turn down the temperature, right? The temperature has to be controlled in a particular way. So if you don't keep an eye on it, the milk will boil over. What's wrong if the milk boils over? If the milk boils over, I will not be able to have the milk ready for my Acharyan in the right way at the right time. That was his argument. The person said, how does it matter? You can come back and do it. Perumal is here. The milk is not important. Perumal himself has come. He said, for me, my Acharya, service to my Acharyan is more important than going and seeing Perumal. If I do service for my Acharyan, that is more important as eventually as a service for Perumal will be happier with me if I do this little boiling of the milk, that service, rather than run to the street and see him, directly. Okay, so it's a small, very small anecdote, but it's a very, in our Sampradayam, it is a very famous one, in that it is just a mark of the devotion that Vaduganambi had towards his Acharya. That's why Thirukkolur Penpillai is saying, Ingu paal pongum endreno. If I go away, he said, if I go away, the milk will boil over. And he was saying that because he wanted to make sure that the Kainkaryam to his Acharya was done in the perfect way. Okay, so the message to us is, when we think about our Acharya, we should always want to do that, our Kainkaryam to him in a perfect way. We should always want to say that whatever we do for our Acharya, we should do it well. And the urge to do something for your Acharya, right, that comes after you have some bhakti for the Acharya. You learn about your Acharya and constantly keep thinking about the Acharya. That is the message for us. Okay, so we should think about our Acharya and think about all their greatness, how they have interacted with us. Whenever we go to India and when we go and see our Acharya and get their blessings, as I keep saying, remember those episodes, remember those interactions. Talk to your parents about what the Acharya said. Even if you don't understand some things the Acharya says, go ask your parents, what did Acharya say. These little memories, those memories will stay with us for a long time and help us create a devotion for the Acharya. That is our only way to make Perumal happy. Okay, so that is the message that Vaduganambi is giving us. The last story is again about a story of Acharya Bhakti, but it's about somebody who we all know about, who is extremely, extremely important in our Sampradaya. So she says, Thirukkolur Penpillai says, Avan Vendam Endreno Alvane Pole. Alvan. In our Sampradayam, if we say Alvan, it refers to Kurattalvan. Okay, so we have all heard of Kurattalvan, right? Yes?
I have.
Who was?
Yeah.
Excellent, very good. So who was Kurattalvan's Acharyan?
Ramanuja.
Excellent.
Kurattalvan was Ramanuja's disciple, and he was also known to be equivalent to the Pavitram of Ramanuja.
Excellent. Okay, very good. So he was one of the most. In fact, Kurattalvan has the distinction of being one of the earliest people who went to Swami Ramanuja and made him their Acharyan. So he's one of the earliest Sishyas of Swami Ramanuja, and who was, just in terms of age, who was older, Kurattalvan or Swami Ramanuja?
Kurattalvan.
Kurattalvan was older.
Kurattalvan.
Exactly. Sorry, did anybody tell me how many years he was older by?
7 years earlier.
Excellent, 7 years, very good. So because we celebrated Kurattalvan's 1000th birth anniversary in the year 2010, and then 2017 we celebrated Swami Ramanuja's 1000th anniversary. All right. So Kurattalvan was one of the greatest Sishyas of Swami Ramanuja, and as one of you said, he and Mudaliyandan are considered to be the Dandam and Pavitram. The Dandam means the Tridandam. The Pavitram is the Jalapavitram, the white cloth that is tied to the Tridandam. Those Mudaliyandan and Kurattalvan were considered to be that close to Swami Ramanuja. Just like any sannyasi would never be parted from their Dandam and Pavitram, Ramanuja could never be parted from Kurattalvan and Mudaliyandan. Okay, the greatness of Kurattalvan is that if you look at Kurattalvan's life, if you look at the way he lived, you look at anecdotes from his life, you can get, it is like a workbook. It tells us how a Sri Vaishnava should be. Okay, so in the Ramanuja Nutrandali, there is a verse about Kurattalvan. Okay, I won't go into the details of the verse, but what the verse says is, Moriye kadakkum perum puharan vanja mukkurumbam kuriye kadakkum nam Kurattalvan. So in the story of the earthen flowers, right? We heard the word kurumbu, correct? The same word kurumbu is coming back here. And when we talk about Kurattalvan, we say mukkurumbu aruthan. He did not have the three bad ways of thinking. He had avoided, he had killed the three bad thoughts that people can have that can prevent them from being a good Sri Vaishnava. Okay, so what are those three bad things? The three failings are the three things that we should always avoid. Okay, and this is very important for us to remember. The first thing is the first failing is being proud of one's birth. Okay, that we are born in a great family, we are born in a great vamsham, those type of things. It is a blessing that Perumal has given us, but we should not be proud of that. Kurattalwan was born came from an extremely illustrious family. He was an extremely wealthy individual. He did not have that kurumbu. So that's the first kurumbu. That's called abhijatyam, or the sort of the greatness of our birth should not be something that we hold any ego about. Right? This is all about killing our ego, right? The second thing is being proud of one's knowledge. We may have learnt a lot of things. We may have had the opportunity to read a lot of books. We may have, acharyas may have taught us a lot of things, but we should never be proud of that. We should feel blessed about it. We should feel grateful about it, but we should never feel proud of that. So that is also something that Kurattalwan demonstrated in his life. And the third thing is being proud of one's anushtana. So saying that, oh, I have impeccable anushtana. So when we talk to each other, we say, oh, you did 100 Gayatri Japam today. I did 1,000 Gayatri Japam today. So if you make such comparisons and think that, oh, okay, I'm greater because I did 1,000 Gayatri Japam, that is a big failure. Again, we should feel grateful that we had the time, the opportunity, the energy, the inclination, all of those things to do it. But we shouldn't say, oh, I did it. So those are the three things. That is what is called as mukkurumbu. So he killed, or he vanquished all of those three failings. Okay, being proud of one's birth, being proud of one's knowledge, and being proud of how well we live our lives. Okay, so that is what Thirukkolur Penpillai is talking about. These three things that Kurattalwan did not have. And we look at. I mean, I keep coming back to Srimad Aishingar. But there are so many examples from Srimad Aishingar's life and his interactions with us that we can see that our acharyas never had that type of a thinking. Whenever Srimad Aishingar talked about his knowledge or what he learned, he always talked about it in the context of how grateful he was to the 42nd Jir, saying, okay, he gave me the blessing. He taught me these things. He would always talk about the blessing that his Purvashram older brother had. He always said, okay, I learned these things because of their grace. That is the way we should think about it, and that is the way Kurattalwan lived. That is what Thirukkolur Penpillai is talking about in these stories as well. So she's talking about one specific story, but we'll look at very briefly. We'll look at some examples of how Kurattalwan did not have pride about his birth, did not have pride about his knowledge or his way of life. Okay. So about his birth. Very early in Kurattalwan's interaction in the Sampradayam, he had a run-in with Varadaraja. As I told you before, Kurattalwan is an extremely wealthy man. So Kuram is a village not very far from Kanchipuram. Kurattalwan his name is Kurattu Alwan because he was a very wealthy, very important person in that city, that town called Kurat. Many of you might have had the opportunity to go there. So he was so wealthy that every day there used to be a lot of Tadiya Radhanam in his house. A lot of people would come, and at night, when they were finished for the day, when they closed the door of Kurattalwan's house, that just closing the door used to make a lot of noise. That's how big his house was. Okay, so when they close the door, it will make a huge noise. So one evening, that the noise of closing that door went all the way from Kuram to Kanjipuram. And the Perumal Varadaraja said, oh, what is that noise? And one of the Archakas told him, oh, this is the sound of Kurattalwan's house closing, or the door closing. And Perumal said, oh, I thought I am the richest person in the world. Looks like Kurattalwan is even richer than that. His door is closing. He must be so wealthy. Somebody came and told this to Kurattalwan. But Perumal remarked, wow, he must be so rich that his door is so big and is making this noise. That minute, Kurattalwan decided that he should give up all his wealth. If Perumal, who is the king of the universe, if he comes and makes a comment about my wealth, he's obviously telling me that I should not be I should not have any ego about this wealth. And at that point, he decided he wanted to give up all his wealth. So he was somebody who killed the pride about one's birth or one's wealth and all those things. Okay, so that's how down to earth Kuratharwan was.
Wow.
Okay, Kuratharwan's knowledge. Kuratharwan and Swami Bhashyakara, Swami Sri Ramanujar, as we said, were very close. So when Ramanujar had to write the Sri Bhashyam, he was told that there is some reference text. We won't go into the details of all this, but he said there was a reference book. There's only one copy of that book is available, and that book is available in Kashmir. Okay, so you have to go and get that. So the one person that Ramanuja took with him was Kuratharwan. And they made a very difficult journey all the way from the south of India to Kashmir, found that book, found the place where that book was, and found the book, and he got the book. But the person who gave the book to him said, look, it's not like today, right? It's not like we have PDFs of all the books and we can make as many copies as we like. There's only those handwritten copies. So they said, look, this book is very important. I can't give you the book. If you want to, you can read it for one day, and you have to go away. So Ramanujar was very worried. So what they did was they had to give the book back and leave, right? So they had it for one night. They had to give the book back and leave, and Ramanujar was very depressed. He said, we made all this effort. We came all this way, but we could have the book only I was hoping that I could take the reference book back, use the reference book and write the Sri Bhashyam. But Kuratharwan said, not to worry. Last night when you were sleeping, I read through the book, and he was such an intelligent person that just by reading that book once overnight, he had completely memorized it. He said, I can tell you exactly what is in the book. We don't need the book anymore. I've committed all of it to my memory. And then they were able to write the Sri Bhashyam. That's how great he was. But never once did Kuratharwan make a big deal out of the fact that he had such an important role to play in making the Sri Bhashyam. Sri Bhashyam is the book that is the core of our of the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. But Kuratharwan never made a big deal out of the fact that he was the rock upon which this Sampradayam is built. Okay? The third thing, Alwan, despite him being, having the greatest of Anushtanam, being the greatest of Sri Vaishnavas, he made the supreme sacrifice. Okay? We're running out of time. Maybe I'll take a few more minutes, but you all know the story of Ramanuja at Kuratharwan when there was an assault, a potential assault on Swami Ramanuja from the local Chora king, who wanted Swami Ramanuja to agree to his principles. Ramanuja, they heard about this, and Ramanuja left Srirangam and went before the king's people could come. Kuratharwan, dressed up as Ramanuja, went into the court of the king, and he basically told the king that he will not do, even if we won't go into the details, but he told the king that he will not agree to what he was asking. So the king said, if you won't agree.
Wasn't he asking to write, since Ramanuja was writing so many great things about Perumal, he wanted something great to be written by him, and he refused, right? So he got his eyes burnt and he was blind.
Exactly. So the king said, king ordered his men and said, this person is not listening to me, so I want you to gouge out his eyes. I want you to make him blind. So Kuratharwan said, I'm doing this in the service of my Sampradaya. I don't even want you guys to touch me. I will make myself blind. And he blinded himself. He made the supreme sacrifice of blinding himself. Now this was a period when Ramanuja had to leave Srirangam, right? Because this king was trying to create some problem for Ramanuja. So Ramanuja was not there. The king then, so Ramanuja had gone away. Kuratharwan blinded himself. Periyanambihal, who was there with Kuratharwan, he was so shocked with this episode that he almost immediately passed away. It was a very dark period for our Sampradaya. The king came up with an order. He said that anybody who has anything to do with Ramanuja cannot go into the temple. Okay, he wanted to completely remove the connection between the Sriranganathan temple and Ramanuja, and that was the order. Okay, so anybody who wanted to go into the temple, there used to be some guards at the front of the temple, and whenever you got into the temple, you had to make a declaration that I have nothing to do with Ramanuja. Only if you say I have nothing to do with Ramanuja were you allowed to go in. Kuratharwan by this time had become a blind person, but he wanted to go into the temple and be close to Perumal. So he did not know that this order was there. He went to the gates of the temple and he said, okay, I want to go into the temple. And these guards stopped him. He said, why are you stopping me? He said, no, there's a new rule. If you want to go into the temple, you have to make a declaration that I have nothing to do with Ramanuja. I don't know who Ramanuja is. I have nothing to do with Ramanuja. Kuratharwan, who was such a strong devotee of Ranganathan, he had such love for Ranganathan, but when they said that this was the condition, Kuratharwan said, if that is the reason, if that is the only way I can see Perumal, then I don't want anything to do with it. I don't want Perumal. I don't want to see Perumal. I will never say that I have nothing to do with Ramanuja. When we have our Samarshyanam, right? All of us, when we have our Samarshyanam, what do our Acharyas say? The name that they give us is Aham Sri Ramanuja Dasosmi. We are Ramanuja Dasas. We are servants of Ramanuja. It is our connection with Ramanuja that is our wealth. So Kuratharwan said, if I have to deny my connection with Ramanuja, it's not just that I don't want any money, I don't want any of the material wealth and all those things. I don't even want Perumal. Okay, so that is the story that Thirukkolur Penpillai is saying. Avan vendam endreno alvane pole. Said Avan means Perumal. Said I don't have that much love for my Acharyan that I am even willing to give up Perumal if I have to give up my Acharya. Okay, so the moral of the story is not that we should give up Perumal. Obviously not, right? But the moral of the story is if there was ever a need to come up with a choice between our love for the Acharyan and love for Perumal, love for Acharyan is more important than love for Perumal. Because if we choose Perumal over the Acharyan, Perumal himself will not be happy. If we choose the Acharyan over Perumal, Perumal will be happy. And the story of Alvan goes on. The Perumal himself gave Devadirajan gave Alvan his eyesight back so that he could just to be able to behold the sight of Varadarajan. And Perumal gave a lot of his love to Kuratharwan because of what he had done. And Kuratharwan's love for Swami Ramanuja and his urge to do service to Ramanuja was so strong that one day he went to Perumal. As we just discussed, Kuratharwan is slightly older than Ramanuja, right? So one day he went to Perumal and said, okay, I'm ready to go. I'm done with this being in this world. I want to go to Srivaikuntram. And it was Kuratharwan's last days. Ramanuja was shocked. He was like, he did not know what to do. He could not think of a life without Kuratharwan. Such was the love between the Acharyan and the Sishyan. And Swami Ramanuja came to Kuratharwan, who was in his deathbed, and said, Alvan, how can you leave me and go? And Alvan's response is something we should always remember. It's something that we should that is a message to us. Kuratharwan said that I have to go before you. I cannot go after you, because what the Vedas say, the Alvars say, that when you go to Srivaikuntram, right? When we are done with this mortal body and we go to Srivaikuntram, as soon as you enter the gates of Srivaikuntram, what happens is a new person is entering by Srivaikuntram, right? When the new person is entering Srivaikuntram, they say that all the existing people there, all the people who came before him, they come and wash this new person's feet. They come and say, "Oh, welcome! You are a great asset to our Goshti. Please come in." And they all give him their respect. Kuratharwan said that, "Oh Ramanuja, if you went before me, you would come out and say, I am blessed by your arrival. That is not how I want it to be. I want to go before you, just like I did service to you here. I want to be there as well before you and do service to you. When you come there, I want to be there to welcome you. I want to be the one washing your feet there." So Kurathalwan, even on his deathbed, all he wanted, even when you go to Sri Vaikuntham, right? A lot of us, we may think, oh, what do we do when we go to Sri Vaikuntham? We'll enjoy Perumal. Even there, what Kurathalwan wanted to do was to do service to his Acharya. Okay, so the service to Acharya should be here and beyond. In Sri Vaikuntham as well, what we should want to do is service to our Acharya. That is the kind of bhakti we should develop for our Acharya. Okay, as youngsters, as people who are very young, not a lot of this may seem like, just a story, but just keep remembering these stories. Just sow the seeds of these stories in your minds. When you learn more about our Acharyas, you will appreciate the importance of these stories, and you will understand how deep our bhakti for our Acharya should be. Okay, a lot of us, we don't have the blessing of being there in Sri Vaikuntham before our Acharyas. Our Acharyas have gone there before us. But just remember how Kurathalwan thought about his relationship with his Acharya. Okay, so that is something that is something very unique about Kurathalwan, and Thirukkolur Penpillai has told us about that feeling of mutual love that the Acharyan and the Shishyan had. Okay, so we'll stop here and start. I'm sorry I've taken a bit of extra time, but I hope you get a sense of how unique and how nice this book Thirukkolur Penpillai Rahasyam is, because it tells us a lot of important stories from the Puranas as well, but very, very important, nice stories that have a lot of learnings for us from the lives of our Acharyas. Okay, and if there is one thing I would like you to take away from this, whenever you get a chance, it's like reading stories, right? Read the Guru Parampara, read the stories of our Acharyas. There are so many interesting stories, small anecdotes, all the important big details we all know. But there are so many little anecdotes in the lives of our Acharyas that will give us a great appreciation for our Sampradayam. And whenever our own Acharya, when you go to see Srimad Aishingar and see how he lives, you will be able to make a connection. Okay, so that's what I would request you all to do. Whenever you find time, read the Guru Parampara. Ask your parents to give you to tell you stories of the Guru Parampara. Okay, so with that we will stop today. Should we stop with Acharya Tanayan? Sriranganath Chatakopa Yatindra Drishtam Lakshmina Sammachadajit Karunaikapatram Srirangavira Ragurat Chatakopa Hridyam Vedanta Deshika Yatindra Maham Prapadye Srimad Ranga Chadari Samyamivaral Lubdhagamantadvayam Srimad Vira Raghu Vahadhi Chadajit Padaravindashayam Srimad Vedavatam Sudeshikete Karunya Vikshaspadam Seve Rangadhrina Shasanavasham Narayanam Yoginam Vedanta Deshiketi Shakatakshulabdhatrayam Tasaramanavadyagunam Budhakriyam Narayana Yetitur Yakapa Vishiktam Shri Ranganath Yetishekaramashayamaha Srimate Shri Vanchadagopa Shri Vedanta Deshiketi Indra Mahadeshikaya Namaha Srimate Shri Lakshmi Nasamadivya Paduka Sevaka Shri Vanchadagopa Shri Narayana Yetindra Mahadeshikaya Namaha Srimate Shri Vanchadagopa Shri Ranganath Yetindra Mahadeshikaya Namaha